You ever get that feeling that your own house is trying to tell you something? Like a faint smell you can't quite place or a little damp spot you just keep ignoring? Well, today, we're gonna put on our detective hats and solve a very common and very sneaky household mystery.
Ah, yes, that smell. You know exactly the one I'm talking about. It's that persistent, kind of damp smell that just it won't go away, no matter how much you try to air the place out. Well, that right there, that's the first clue in a case that might be unfolding, literally, right under your feet.
And look, this secret, it isn't some ghost in the attic. It's something much more real, a silent intruder, and it's getting in where it absolutely should not be. We're talking about water. So let's dive in and really uncover what's going on here. Okay, so our first job as home detectives is to identify the main suspect. Now, this isn't some big dramatic event like a flood or a burst pipe. No, this is something much quieter and honestly, far more persistent. So let me introduce you to our prime suspect, floor seepage. The best way to think about it is like a slow motion invasion. It's basically groundwater pressure that's gently but just relentlessly nudging moisture through all the tiny natural pores in your concrete foundation day in and day out. The source material we're looking at today puts it so perfectly. It says, the water creeps. And that one phrase just captures the nature of our culprit exactly, right? It's not some sudden attack. It's this slow, quiet infiltration that, frankly, most homeowners miss until the signs become absolutely impossible to ignore. So, we've identified our suspect, floor seepage. But how does it break in? I mean, every good detective needs to know the method of entry. So let's go examine the crime scene. It's really a classic four-step process. So first, you've got poor drainage that lets rainwater just pool up around your foundation. Then, step two, all that water sitting there creates some pretty intense pressure. We call it hydrostatic pressure. Third, the water now under pressure finds a weak spot. It could be a tiny hairline crack or an old seal. And then, finally, step four, seepage begins. The water is inside and the damage starts. And believe me, there are plenty of weak spots for water to choose from. A high water table can push up from below. Your foundation naturally settles over time, and that creates tiny cracks. Or, maybe the original waterproofing system that was put in is just getting old and failing. These are basically the unlocked doors and the open windows for that creeping water. All right, now for the fun part, gathering the evidence. Knowing what to look for is absolutely crucial, because if you don't recognize the signs, this intruder can operate completely undetected for months, maybe even years. Okay, let's get our magnifying glasses out. Here is the evidence you're looking for. That musty smell? That's clue number one for sure. Then you want to look for actual damp patches, any visible mold, or maybe paint that's peeling off the walls. And you see that white chalky stuff on the list? That is a major piece of evidence, and we need to examine it a lot more closely. Okay, let's zoom in on that one key piece of evidence. Because while a damp spot could be anything, this particular clue, well, this one tells us exactly where the water has been, and more importantly, where it came from. It's a funny word. It's called efflorescence. Now, here's the thing. Unlike a simple damp spot, which, could just be from a temporary spill, efflorescence is totally different. It is the mineral trail left behind only after water has traveled all the way through your concrete and then evaporated. So it's not mold, it's a mineral salt. And it is a crystal clear sign the water is coming from outside or from below. You can almost think of it as water leaving behind its calling card. It's a definitive sign that says, I was here. If you see this on your floors or walls, the case is pretty much open and shut. You have a seepage problem. And now we get to the most important part of our investigation. What are the stakes? What happens if we see all these clues, but we just close the case file and do nothing? It is so easy to dismiss a little dampness, right? Or to see a tiny crack and think, it's nothing. But the reality is that constant moisture is actively weakening the concrete and the masonry of your foundation. What starts out small can escalate into a major, major threat to your home's entire structural integrity. And that basement smell, it's not harmless. It's the byproduct of mold and mildew, which just thrive in these damp environments. And this directly impacts your family's health. It can contribute to allergies, respiratory problems, and a whole host of other health concerns. And of course, that leads us to the financial cost. Ignoring the small problem now almost guarantees you'll be paying for a huge problem later.
And we are talking thousands and sometimes tens of thousands of dollars in repairs for structural damage that was at one point entirely preventable. So there you have it. We've cracked the case, we know the culprit, we know the method, and we know the consequences. So now, the investigation really turns to you. Your home is constantly communicating with you through these little clues. The only question left is, are you paying attention?